We might just start. Thanks everyone who have joined this session in person. We have some new faces as well here in this seminar that we haven't met before. Thanks for coming, and thanks for those who have joined online. So for those who might not know me, my name is Shirin Malikpour. I'm an associate professor at MSCI, and I also head up the PhD program at the Institute. I'm the chair for the session today. And we are very pleased to have a very great speaker, one of our own actually, for today's session that I will introduce very briefly. Before that, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are coming together today, people of the Kulin Nation and their elders past, present, and emerging. A couple of words about MSCI Research Seminar Series for those who might also be new to the series. These are sessions that we normally run around once a month for an hour. And really the intention is to provide a forum where we can come together, discuss ideas and discuss research projects that are working on different aspects of sustainable development, and really have a forum where we can exchange ideas, hear about other research, and also provide feedback, but also identify potential collaborations as they might align with our own research interests. So we often have a mix of speakers from internal to Monash or external, also people from overseas sometimes speak in our series. Today we have an internal speaker, Dr. Andrea, I still love to say that, Dr. Andrea Cuesta Claros. Oh, you got it. It's almost there. So Andrea is currently an assistant lecturer in our education program at MSCI, but not very long ago before that, she was a PhD candidate here at MSCI. And her topic was on looking at the SDGs in relation to the universities and how the SDGs, if and how the SDGs would have a transformative potential for universities. And this is the topic that she will present today. Andrea's background is, like MSCI, very interdisciplinary. She comes from both a practice and an academic background. Her background is in design and in engineering. And then, of course, her PhD was more of a sociological PhD. And her design background actually gave her very great skills in preparing presentations. We always loved her presentations during PhD meetings. So I'm sure you will enjoy the visuals today as well as the narrative and the content. Andrea, another point to add is also she also has worked really in different contexts, in different countries and in different continents, which I think gives her also a very unique perspective into this topic. She has worked both in Europe, in Finland, Denmark, but also in Mexico and in US as well. And currently, of course, in Australia in the past few years in Australia. So the floor is yours, Andrea. We'll have roughly around 25 minutes of presentation. And then after that, we'll have time for question and answer from the audience.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Shirin. Well, I think you said it all, so I don't have to introduce myself that much. I want to say thank you to the master students from the MES that are here too. So if you see new faces, it's because they are our students from the unit Perspectives on Sustainability. We have some people online too. I told them about the seminar today, and some of them came along. We'll meet later. We'll have some activities later about other things. So I mean, Shirin explained already this. What I'm presenting today is mainly based on my PhD. I started a PhD in 2019, September 2019, and I'm just double checking, yes, September 2019, and I submitted my PhD a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. It was a little bit of a long examination wait, but I'm seeing the light, I'm there, and this is the thesis. That's not printed yet, but if you're interested in reading a thesis, just let me know and I'll send it to you. And I also want to thank quickly I know that we already did an acknowledgement on country, but this PhD and this research, I've interviewed people from Australia and from Mexico. So I do want to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations, but also people in Sydney. There's a long list, and I have them written here. The Darug, Eora, Darwal, Wiradjuri peoples, and also in Mexico, the Nahua, the Wirrárica, the Huichol, the Tzotzil, and the Mam. So these are the areas where I interviewed people, or these are the traditional owners and custodians of the areas and the cities where I interviewed people online, but still there was always a reference to Indigenous people, Indigenous knowledges. Even though my PhD didn't exactly focus on that, it was always there. It was always present, and we always talked about it at some point because we were talking about sustainability and universities. So to me, this is the first time that I present in person. This is crazy. This is the first time I present in person in front of my supervisors, in front of the people who were part of my panel, Aneta there, Tal is online. I've presented this project quite a few times elsewhere, but not at MSDI because of COVID. So to me, it's kind of closing that circle too, and I really like circles. You'll see it in my slides. So I have two different starting points in this PhD, and one was universities and the other one was the SDGs. So personally, I was very interested in universities. I'm very interested in universities and change. Through my educational experiences, I gone through transformative change of like personal one, coming from a different type of discipline and into sustainability. I experienced all of these changes through a very nice master program that then redirected me and my thinking, and I continuously think about it. So I was very interested in understanding change in university, obviously for sustainability. And when I started the PhD, it was also the time where, well, the SDGs are still very popular, but it was the right time to look at the SDGs and how universities were engaging with them, and also look if universities or the SDGs were transforming universities, what type of change is happening when universities turn their attention towards the SDGs and Agenda 2030. And my starting point when looking at universities and the SDGs was very much the work of previous higher education and sustainable development researchers and scholars that argue that higher education and universities, but higher education, the wider one, has to play or has a potential to play a transformative role in society in creating and in constructing more desirable worlds and more desirable futures. However, this is a potential. So universities need to be themselves a subject of transformation for them to be more transformative in society. So that was very much my starting point, and I kept calling it the double transformation challenge in my thesis, because it is about transforming yourself or transforming universities to be more transformative in society. And adding the layer of the SDGs is very much a very similar argument. Universities are not only enablers of change in the SDG agenda, but they're also very important targets of change. Again, change sort of inside, so they can change outside too. They can be more transformative. So when I talk about transformation and transforming what, I think about transformation at different levels. So first is transforming what the role of universities is in society, their role, the bigger role, the meta role, not the different roles, kind of like the smaller ones or the lower level ones. Talking about the purpose, the core, the ethos of the university, transforming that. It is also about transforming the institution, the policies, the strategies, the procedures, the programs, and also how we educate, what we educate, and what we research, and how we engage with society. So it is at that level, as in the university and the purpose and the missions of the university that I look at when I talk about transformation. So my PhD, being a PhD by publication or by published works, I focused on 3 different objectives, questions. Oh, nice. I think it'll go away. So I focused on 3 different questions. So the first one is perhaps my blazer that is also a little bit funny with the microphone. The first one was looking into that particular role. What does it mean that universities need to transform their role in society? The second one was how bringing in or focusing more on the SDGs, to what extent have the SDGs transformed universities? And in the third one, looking into the different perspectives of different university actors. How are they thinking about it? Because in the end, it's not only about saying, oh, the university will approach the SDGs in this way, and there's just one way, and everyone will be will agree on that. It is very much about the different people and how, with different levels of power, how they are integrating the SDGs, what they think about them, if they're on board or not. So first, for the role of the university, these are not very scientific questions, but it's more to kind of simplify the questions that I was wondering, or that I had there in front of me when I was looking at this particular study or part of my study. What are universities for? What should universities be for? And what should be the role of universities in society? So for that, and this is something that I've explained quite a few times to my supervisors, and this has always been part of my presentation. I like to look back a little bit at the history of universities. What are they for? And this is a very Eurocentric and Western history, so it's not acknowledging institutions of higher education that existed in India and in Egypt and in other parts of the world, but more the Euro history of them, because those are the institutions that did last, that did continue. They didn't have those breakages. So to very much simplify it, this is a very, very simplified version of it because it's a brief research seminar. One of the universities originally were built for education. So the first mission, we call it, the first mission of the universities is education. So this is very much the model of the medieval university in the 12th century, where the purpose was to educate the elite of masters and doctors in very specific disciplines: rhetoric, grammar, logic, arithmetic, and more. And then around the 19th century, the Humboldtian University came in Germany, well, in what is now known as Germany. And that introduced the second mission of the university, which is research. So this is more of an inquirer of knowledge, creating new knowledge, creating scientific advances to progress, or for human progress. And this is very much thinking that there's one true of knowledge, and we have to understand that's true, and that's why we devise how we look at research. So there are disciplines, and it's a very academic specification way. That was a weird word, sorry. How we look at this true and understand and create scientific advances. And then the third mission was introduced in many different ways. Again, in my simplified version of the history, is very much looking at two different types of universities: the land grant universities in the US in the 1800s, and entrepreneurial universities, mainly in what we call the global north, in the 1990s. And here, these two were trying to say, it is not only about education, it's not about research, it's about engaging with society. We're part of society and we have to benefit society. They looked at it a bit differently. So the land grant university were universities created in the US, specifically in areas where they didn't have access to education beforehand, in a relatively new independent country, and in states where they didn't have any institution of higher education, the government gave them the grant to universities, and then they built the universities, and then they built the capacities of the local people and served the regional or regional development of them. And entrepreneurial university is a little bit more focused towards economic growth. So collaborating in the third mission, you engage with society, collaborating with industry particularly, and always looking for some sort of income generation there. So as you can see, historically, the role of the university in society has changed from education to human progress through scientific advancement, to creating some sort of support to their local areas and the regions and the economy. But when you add the sustainability layer, so when I was looking at this and I was questioning, what are universities for? What are universities for? I need to shift to what should universities be for? We talk about sustainability and the specific problems that come with the polycrisis that we now see in sustainability. Are they enough? Is educating enough? Is research enough? yes, if you redirect it. So I was very interested in these kind of normative models of how people, particularly at a conceptual level, so idea level, of how some researchers think that the university or propose that the university should be for. And I found four different university models, but they're not models as in blueprints. These are more concepts and ideas. And I analyzed them through a framing analysis. I'm not going to go through the method very in much detail, but in the end, the framing analysis allowed me to unpack these different ideas based on what they propose and what they problematize. So what do they say is the problem with universities right now? What should we do about them? So these are the four, I'm just gonna show them together. These are the four types of university models that I looked into in my first part of my research, so the first year and a half of my PhD. And I followed this part of the mission just to make it easy to understand based on the history. So all of them have that community engagement or some sort of engagement with society as a core to their mission and their role in society. But these are a little bit different between themselves, if not a lot different, particularly this one, in how they understand the problems of the university right now and how they think that universities should engage with society and create impact and create these futures or sustainable futures. So I'll go through them briefly, so I don't really get into the itty-bitties of or like the inner workings of everything and the theory behind all of them. But for example, the first two, human development and developmental university, are very much based or criticize this way that universities right now are focusing on economic growth. They criticize that a lot of the universities are very much focused on marketization, on commodification, on income generation. So it's very money oriented. And in the end, that affects how we, what we think the university should be for. So for this one, the Human Development University says that because universities are seen as engines of economic growth and almost as factories of people that are highly skilled that will benefit the economy, that's how we're seeing them. You go to university to make money later on through your degree, instead of thinking that universities should be enablers of human well-being. We should work for human well-being, not economic growth. And this will resonate with some of the people that are in my class. So the Human Development University is based on the ideas of human development of Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum as an alternative to development, sorry, a development alternative. And they say we should shift to human well-being. And when we shift to human well-being, we'll interact with people quite differently. So it won't be just kind of molding people to have a particular degree and go and create the money that they need and support their local economy. It will be people that are empowered, that engage with others through participation, that allow others to create opportunities for others to be well, to live well. And that is quite different to be richer or to support a particular industry. It is about people. The second one, the second developmental university, is very similar in its criticisms, but one of their main criticisms is that universities are highly competitive, and because of competition, we're just selling high quality knowledge. So we have different tiers of universities based on academic quality, and that one is definitely the way that we think about quality in this type of universities right now is not oriented towards sustainability. So because we are having all of these tiers of types of universities, we're also restricting access to education and knowledge to many people. And to people are also not benefiting from this knowledge that we're creating in universities because we're increasingly commoditizing the universities. So this particular university is based on the SDGs in a bit of a different way to how we would expect it. So these scholars say that the SDGs are very much about leaving no one behind at its core. So this idea of social justice. So if universities really want to serve the SDGs, they need to open up access to knowledge. People should be able to go to university without having to pay. So it's a very much a universal access to education, but also the way that we work and engage with society, or the types of advancements and research projects that we do, which should always be to serve society, should not be to create some sort of income out of those relationships with industry to then kind of just benefit privately. It should always be to benefit someone else. So they're a little bit on that side. The criticisms are very similar. But then there comes the transformative university, which would be a little bit more perhaps practical in how it sees how universities should change. So in this particular idea of the university from Gregory Trencher, which actually came to the research seminars, I think a year ago, they say, yes, the third mission has been focusing a little bit more on that technology transfer and income generation, on perhaps partnering with particular industries. And that is sort of wrong in the way that we have as a university many a big creative power to solve things. So we shouldn't just direct it there. We should have a fourth new mission where we redirect this collaborative and creative powers of universities, students, researchers, people just working at universities to create solutions for sustainability. So this one, again, says that all of the missions of the university could coexist. And at some point, the fourth mission will start driving these towards sustainability. So through living labs, through experiments, through social innovation, through all of those ways in which we collaboratively solve issues related to sustainability, that's how the university will start changing. So that's the transformative university. And the last one is the post-developmental university. And this one is very much based on a fundamental criticism of universities and knowledge and how we do or think about knowledge in universities. So this is very much the post-developmental university thinks that universities should be deinstitutionalized. So we really shouldn't be universities as we are now, because we're based on an idea of knowledge that should be fragmented, and that's how we're going to reach knowledge. We only value Western academic knowledge in universities, or primarily value that, and we're not open to other types of knowledges, particularly indigenous knowledges. So in the post-developmental university, they say that is wrong. We shouldn't just be looking at this type of knowledge and just inquire it or focus on that one. We should open up, and knowledge again should be for everyone. So I call it like the university that's not a university, because in the end, it doesn't necessarily say that universities should have these types of departments or these missions or faculties which should work like that. It is more of a communal space for learning. So it's not really a university how we understand it. And when looking at all of these different roles that perhaps were at a very high level, I was also questioning or wondering where are the SDGs. So in terms of the SDGs, these two different universities are very much aligned to the SDGs in different ways. So for the transformative university, the SDGs are seen as challenges that we can co-create to solve those issues. For the developmental university, the SDGs, as I said before, are very much, they start from that leaving no one behind. So if we understand the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs as leaving no one behind, the developmental university is the one that should be the one that's the best aligned with this. But the other two, the Human Development University and the Post-Developmental University, have some issues with the SDGs, particularly the last one, saying the SDGs, in the end, they're indicators, they're metrics, they value a particular type of knowledge, they value economic growth, even though it's green. And it is sort of a step in the right direction, but it should be our aim. If we're trying to create a more sustainable society, the SDGs are perhaps not the right way. So, well, this particular study ended up being my first paper. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things about it. Sorry. So why did I spend so much time looking at these different ideas that aren't necessarily giving us instructions on how to build a university? First of all, I thought it was very interesting to focus on the roles and these different ideas that underpin what should a university be for. So those normative, at that normative level and conceptual level. But it is also important because futures or ideas and images of futures matter. So what we think that how we feel, how we can imagine the university right now, sometimes it's a little bit restrictive. If we open up to other ideas, then we see them as possible. So I wanted to question those different ideas and open up that space of saying a sustainable university is not only this type of university, which perhaps some people maybe here at Monash would think is more of a transformative university. A sustainable university can be one that challenges other things, that challenges commodification, marketization, that challenges that view of only a few people can access quality knowledge. And that is also related to sustainability. So again, it was opening up to those different futures or possible futures of the university and society. So for the second paper, I focused a lot more, or the second study focused a lot more on the SDGs and looking into to what extent have the SDGs transformed universities and what is the scope and depth of change. So I started from this was sort of my starting point for that particular study, where I was seeing that universities were committing to the SDGs, that universities were part of different networks that were about the SDGs, and that universities were increasingly joining SDG rankings and just thinking about the SDGs a lot more in different ways. So I did a case study, I'll explain that in a second, but I used this particular analytical framework where I looked at two different things or different ways of thinking. I put these two together to analyze how much the SDGs or the extent to which they had transformed universities. So first, the steering effect. I looked into 4 different ones based on the work of Rob and Andrea Ordóñez-Llanos, and I think also John Thwaites at some point. I think he's also a co-author, so work from some people here at MSDI and elsewhere. So I looked at discursive effects of the SDGs, so how are the SDGs being used in organizational narratives and strategic documents and kind of those more formal documents and narratives and ideas and identities of universities. Then I also looked at the institutional changes, so how much are the SDGs driving change in policies, programs, rules, norms, and specifically in the university, in educational programs, research programs, and more, operations and more. Then I looked at the relational effects. So are the SDGs creating new partnerships to support the SDGs? And resource effects, is there an increase or a change in resource allocation because of the SDGs in universities? And then I looked at the depth of change. So I also wanted to distinguish not only the types, but also how deep those changes were happening in the university. So I based this on the work of Stephen Sterling, who bases his work on Bateson levels of learning. So I distinguish again 4 levels. No change, meaning the SDGs are not being integrated. Accommodative change, meaning the SDGs are accommodated into the university. So in different isolated parts of the university, not necessarily connected. And then there are other agendas that counteract some of the effects within the university. So you accommodate it again. Then reformative change means that the way that you're engaging with the SDGs are helping you start questioning some of the norms, some of the things that are considered normal within the university, and then introduce significant changes. And then the transformative level is are the SDGs transforming the university? Are the SDGs helping question the paradigms, the programs, and change the ethos or the core of the university? So very much related to that role and the purpose of the university itself, but also all of the other changes that are needed in the university to reorient towards that new role. So I did a case study of 2 universities in Australia and 2 universities in Mexico. And I interviewed people. I talked to a lot of people. I talked to 57 people in total and different types of actors or university actors in the university. So students, sustainability managers, people working in research and education, university leadership, and people also working in partnership offices. And then I also looked at a lot of their plans and their strategies and their documents. Looking again to follow this particular effect, the depth of change and the steering effect. And what did I find? I'll go specifically, I want to highlight the quotes a little bit more. So in terms of discursive effects, the universities, and these will probably resonate with some of you. So the SDGs are being used to reaffirm the university's commitment to society. So you'll see quite often universities saying, or university leaders saying, we are committed to the SDGs. They speak very well to how we see our role in society. We want to help society, thus we're supporting the SDGs. They're also using to support the university's reputation and differentiate from other universities. So you'll see universities around the world saying we're SDG leaders. We are SDG leaders in Mexico. We're SDG leaders in Australia. We're world SDG leaders. So that's coming up also quite a lot. And then they're also using the SDGs to frame and to some extent legitimize some of the activities they already or that they're working on and communicate their impact. And this can happen ex ante or ex post, meaning they create a particular program or project or initiative supporting the SDGs, and then they use the SDGs to communicate it. Or they had a project maybe 5 years ago, and then they say, look, it very much aligns with the SDGs. So I'm just going to use the SDGs to highlight this project, even though it existed before we committed to the goals. And this is not necessarily bad. People understand that, or the people that I was talking to in these 4 different universities would say, we are aware that our projects were born out of a different necessity at a different point in time. But we learned when we saw that people were looking at the SDGs, we identified the commonalities, and we're using the SDGs to support this particular project. So it's not only to try to change things and to try to manipulate people and say we're doing everything about or based on the SDGs. It's also understanding there are things that align with them. In terms of institutional effects, some universities, and so the discursive effects are the most common, but there are also very important or interesting institutional effects in universities. So we are seeing some changes in university-wide strategies, sustainability plans, even how they evaluate and report their impact to society. And then also some changes in education, research, their mission, and campus operations, but these are not as strong. So some of the ones that I would like to share with you was one university in Mexico, not necessarily only based on the SDGs, but partly because of the SDGs, created what would be in Australia a DVC, a Deputy Vice Chancellor. So they had a Deputy Vice Chancellor of Sustainability, Societal Inclusion, I think, and Impact, I think that's the name. And they said, again, not only because of the SDGs, but the SDGs helped kind of sell that idea to the leaders of our university. So some very important changes in universities sort of based on the SDGs. But then the ones that are a lot more common are the SDGs incorporated into sustainability plans or strategies, or starting to design or to figure out which indicators the university is going to look at when they measure their impact against the SDGs. So that is becoming more and more common. And then another university in Mexico also said that their third mission, their social service, which is mandatory in Mexico for university students, they were organizing all of the options of this sort of volunteering. It's not volunteering, but we call it social service. They were basing it on the SDGs. So students, when they would go and look for these different options of their social service, they would filter based on the SDGs. So again, we're seeing a lot of mapping and flagging and identifying things and aligning them with the SDGs. In terms of relational effects, and this becomes less and less common, relational and resource effects, but there are also, so I identified some changes. So collaborations within a university because of the SDGs, or collaborations with other universities, or collaborations with government, the private sector, and civil society. So for example, particularly for universities in Mexico, the SDGs have allowed them to interact with universities in other parts of the world and saying, let's work about the SDGs, let's work on the SDGs and connect and support that internationalization agenda. And other universities around the world are also being part of networks and worldwide networks on the SDGs. So they're again connecting based on sustainability issues more than before. And then in terms of resource effects, there are some changes of these resource allocation. So there are some jobs that have been created in different universities. Particularly, they want to look at how to measure the impact on the SDGs. They hire someone, or they redirect someone that was in one department to another department. They change them, and then they say you have to look into now how we're contributing to the goals. But also, and before I said there were some partnerships with government and private sector and civil society. So that is happening in the 4 universities that I studied. However, sometimes they would think that, particularly in Mexico, the government would approach universities and think that that was going to be free. So they were not getting any resources or new resources based for these partnerships and this extra work that they were doing on the SDGs. So it's still not quite there. So based on that study, looking at the different effects and then the levels of change, discursive effects are the most common and are the ones that are hinting towards transformative change. So universities are using the SDGs to talk about a different role in society. They are talking about how they serve society and they should serve society and around sustainability. However, and institutional effects and the relational and resource effects, they're more on the accommodative, a little bit towards the reformative side. So still some initiatives are being just accommodated into the universities, and they're still fighting for attention with other agendas that probably counteract them, but not everyone has identified those possible tensions between the different initiatives and just people pulling in different directions. So overall, not really a transformative change because of the SDGs for now. But when talking to a lot of the people in these different universities, we were wondering quite often if the SDGs are meant to take the universities to that transformative space, or if universities will if the SDGs will transform universities or not. And a lot of them were thinking, I think the SDGs should be positioned a little bit more here. I think they're a good stepping stone. They can take us to a reformative space if we engage with them critically. But perhaps the transformative space is beyond the SDGs because of its limitations. And this was quite evident with some of the universities that were sort of signing and supporting the SDGs, but they had very clear ideas of where they wanted to be and their ideas of well-being and sustainability and social justice that were not necessarily the SDGs or based on the goals. So for me, well, that was also published in a paper, if you want to know a little bit more of the, maybe all of the quotes and the gossip there, and on how universities are engaging with the SDGs, or these 4 universities that I studied. But from these 2 papers, or these 2 studies that I was looking into and talking to people and thinking about different ideas, I couldn't help but thinking constantly about how different people and different decision makers in universities think about the SDGs quite differently. And this is obviously going to sound very logical, like common sense. Not everyone's going to be on board, even if they're on board with sustainability. But I just wanted to unpack that a lot more and looking into the different perspectives. So for the 3rd study, I looked into the different perspectives, the shared perspectives in a particular university, at Monash University, about SDG integration. So for that one, I found 3 of them, 3 perspectives. And for that one, I used a method called Q methodology, where I asked people, well, I had a set of statements that I asked people individually to order those statements. And then based on an analysis, a factor analysis, I identified the shared perspective. So 3 perspectives that a group of 29 people have in common. So it's not classifying absolutely every person that I talked to, but it's finding more those shared ways of thinking about the SDGs. This is an example of what I asked them to do. So the statements, and then people would order them based on how much they think or they align with the idea, how much they don't align with the idea, and what they think a bit neutral, a bit ambivalent. So it's very much prioritizing these statements so we can find the shared perspective. So out of those 3, out of that study, I found 3 perspectives. The first one is about championing the SDGs. The second one is about pragmatically engaging with the goal. And the last one is about critically engaging with the goals. And perhaps when I explain this, hopefully you'll think of some people that think that way, or different ways of thinking about the SDGs, or that you've seen that the SDGs have been put forward. These are some of the logics that go behind that. So for championing the SDGs, people were very much, I think it's quite descriptive. So people in this particular group, which was the most common one, said that we need to start using the SDGs a lot more. They should become part of the university's identity. So the SDGs should become part of our identity if we genuinely want to make a difference. And so we should have our identity wrapped up in that story. So they very much support that, aligning a lot with the SDGs and using the SDGs for big changes. Because the SDGs can help tell a coherent institutional story of how we're contributing to society. And then also they would say that we need to find ways on how to evaluate that. It's not only about aligning, we need to figure out how we're really supporting the goals. And they would say you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So we need to develop metrics to evaluate how we're addressing the SDGs. So particularly this group see the SDGs with a high degree of interpretative flexibility, meaning that even though when they acknowledge that the SDGs might have gaps, but they think that the SDGs are good enough as an umbrella term that they can include things that they ignore. So for example, the SDGs doesn't necessarily or doesn't explicitly mention indigenous villages, or they don't challenge capitalism, but these people that support the SDGs say, fair enough, but there is space within the SDGs to include these other things that they're not doing. So we should not let perfect be the enemy of the good, or we should not throw out the baby's water with baby in it. I think that's what one person said that I interviewed. So again, the SDGs are big enough, wide enough, good enough to use them at a very high level and wrap our institutional story and narratives around them. The second one is more about pragmatically engaging with the SDGs. So these people think that the SDGs should not be the driving force of changes in universities. And the SDGs universities are much more than the SDGs. So there are questions that are an important part of being a human being. There's something about fundamental basic knowledge, about creative arts, imagination, that are so important to society. However, it's not that easy to translate it in terms of the SDGs. So we would limit ourselves if we wrap our work around the goals. And also, if we start changing things in the university based on the SDGs, they think that there's a limited supply or limited resources. So the changes would redirect money that is focused in one area to the SDGs, and then we would underfund some areas that are very important. But at the same time, they understand that there are some good things about the SDGs, that you can talk to particular actors, but they don't think that we should be recognized as an SDG university. So if our engagement with the SDG brings funds, if it brings new collaborations, new partnerships, nice. If not, we don't need to do a lot more. And then the last one, and I'm coming to an end soon, is about critically engaging with the SDGs. This group of people say the SDGs are not designed for universities. No matter how much we try to align them and force them into it, they were designed for someone else, for national governments. They weren't designed for universities, for knowledge institutions. So we shouldn't be trying that much to kind of fit them in. And then others would say, look, the SDGs might be good to showcase some of our impact, but if I go to a local community, I'm not going to go with the 17 goals and be like, where does it hurt? Like, which one is it? Like, that's not how I can collaborate, how I communicate with them. And very much the impact that we should be doing is with local communities and their needs, and it should come through their needs. So they think that, yes, the SDGs can communicate a little bit of our impact. It depends who you're talking to, but they're very limited. And then they also have fundamental issues with the goals, such as its alignment to capitalism and economic growth. So this quote I think, encapsulates it all. So they say the SDGs do not inherently question our current capitalist structures and do not introduce or allow for any different alternative economic base that isn't anything other than the neoliberal growth mindset. So I do not believe that they are wholly suitable for universities. So they think that those fundamental issues with the SDGs is just, that should be an enough case to not engage with them, or to critically be very, very careful with how we engage with them. So why unpacking perspectives instead of looking at how universities should engage with the SDGs? So from that second study, why did I then go back to perspectives? Well, because it allows us to understand the contradictions and anticipate the possible conflicts when we're talking about change in universities. So we very rarely unpack these perspectives. We focus on unpacking the differences. We often ignore them. And it is needed to understand the plurality of the perspectives if we are to engage in change. And it is also a self-reflective exercise. So the people that I would talk to during these interviews, they would say, I've never thought about that. Or I've never kind of stopped and paused and thought about what I think the role of the university is and how we should engage with the SDGs. So these are processes of self-confrontation that even as people working in the sustainability space, we don't often give enough time for that. So that was also published relatively recently, like about a month or 2 months ago. So if you want to learn more about that one, there's also the paper there. I can send it to you if you're interested. So in the end, in this PhD or in this project looking at universities and the SDGs, I was asking myself 2 different questions. So, or one big question: how do the SDGs relate to this role? So, have the SDGs influenced the role of universities? Sort of, moderately. So the SDGs have helped renew these goals of change and saying universities are for society and we need to support society in this way. And there's still time, right? Universities are still engaging with the SDGs, are still thinking of different ways of engaging with them. And universities that were engaging with them, even though we're in 2024, they're still just finding the SDGs and engaging with them. So not everyone has found them just yet, and they're still in the process of doing that. So there's still time for that, to influence the roles and transform the roles of universities. Have the roles of universities influence how we engage with the SDGs? Yes, at different levels, at the conceptual level, so those ideas of universities, at the institutional level and at the individual level. As in, people that work on sustainability might not be supportive of the SDGs and might not be pushing for those types of changes. And also, if a university perceives itself as a particular type of university, they might prefer different types of engagement with the SDGs than others. So that is happening. I'm gonna skip this one just because I know that I spoke too much. But I just want to highlight this one. So in the PhD, I don't particularly say let's not engage with the SDGs or let's engage with the SDGs. It's more like I argue for a critical engagement or an engagement with the SDGs that goes beyond the superficial one. So there are ways that universities are adopting the SDGs that can be, like there are potential drawbacks in the ways that they're doing it. So sometimes we're oversimplifying the SDGs. For example, with the SDG rankings, it is great that the universities are being recognized for their impact on the SDGs. However, the SDG rankings and how they analyze the metrics and the types of metrics that they have and the indicators that they have, it's not a very holistic understanding of the goals. So as universities, we're kind of going for that star and saying we're number 1, we're number 10, we're number 40 something in the SDG ranking. That means that we're doing great. But in the end, what they're measuring is not necessarily reflecting the complexity of sustainability challenges. And also rankings can fuel a competitive environment. So it is very much about, I am the SDG leader. And it is, again, that same story of which university you go to, quality education, and then not available to everyone. So that can lead to certain selectivity and elitism, even if it's about the SDGs, which that competitiveness can go against the collaborative values that are championed by the goals themselves. SDG tagging is also very common, or icon branding. So using the goals to highlight how certain activities are aligned with the goals. And that can raise awareness, but if we understand them as isolated projects and we don't understand how those individual projects with their individual icon are part of a whole, then we're also kind of going against these or failing to foster significant changes, which also relates to overlooking that interdependence of the SDGs. So again, it's not only failing to acknowledge that they're part of a whole, it's also supporting maybe goal 7, goal 9, goal 10, goal 11, and maybe some of those actions are counteracting each other, and we're not identifying their potential trade-offs within a single university. So we need to constantly reflect on the, I think, or through the PhD, I ended up in this set of recommendations. We need to actively reflect on what is the role of the university, step back and say, what is the university for? What should the university for? And it can have many meanings, but it is important to, again, think about that and reflect on that. And acknowledge that there are different understandings of sustainability, the role of universities and the SDGs within universities. And we should create spaces for having or for a generative dialogue. So, and then I think also, particularly with my second study, I think there is a value of identifying how much our initiatives are changing the university or not, which we're not doing. We're analyzing university initiatives and applying to the rankings and reporting against the SDGs, but we're not checking how much they're changing the university itself. And this is kind of a favorite of mine, also identifying and nurturing nascent, these alternatives that exist in the peripheries of what it is to be a university, what it is to engage with different knowledges. And this is my last slide. For the future, for myself, obviously, I finished that PhD, sent it to get my PhD degree. But I'm also I'm very interested in universities and change and trying to enable change there. So I am very interested in looking into alternative university futures. Sorry, alternative, the quotation would be here, alternative university futures. But also as an educator, I'm very much interested in transformative learning. So more the education part of it and perspective in change. So yeah, I'll figure my way into those things. But it was nice to talk about the SDGs. Haven't talked about them for a while. And looking back at my PhD thesis and talking about universities. So thanks a lot for your attention. I'll stay there. Thank you. Sorry, it was not 25 minutes here.
Definitely not. And we have very limited time for questions and answers.
But I'm around all the time if you want to ask questions.
Of course. We already have a hand up on Zoom. It's Tal. Tal, please go ahead. And you guys, if you have questions, please prepare to answer. And keep the answers and questions very brief so that we can maybe cover a couple.
Yes. Tal.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Andrea. And it's kind of weird to see myself on the screen from back there. So I just firstly wanted to say that your PhD has been really quite transformative around my own thinking around the SDGs and universities, because as you know, we've had a program at MSDI where we host the Sustainable Development Solutions Network for Australia, New Zealand, Pacific, to engage universities on the SDGs. And we've been doing this for many years and have produced guides and run regular groups for universities on how to engage the SDGs. And I'm really keen to hear what other practical things we should do as a network to help progress how the universities are thinking around sustainable development and have genuine engagement with the SDGs, because we do have this opportunity through the work we already do at MSDI. And I'm just thinking, what are the concrete things that we could be doing? Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to keep it brief, knowing that we can talk about this another time, Tal. So what university networks can do, I guess, is it's talking about what that critical engagement means. As in, I think the work that many university networks have been doing, I don't know where to stand. I'm just going to look at you, even though it's a bit weird. I think it's great work that these different university networks in across the world are doing. But at the same time, it has focused very much in the early stages to get universities on board, right? Then share knowledge and almost like make a case for the SDGs and for universities to approach the SDGs. So I think it could be a good time to put more emphasis on that critical engagement with the goals. So in questioning certain things. So questioning the metrics or the way that we're looking at the SDGs, how we're tagging our work, and just unpacking that a little bit more. Not for the sake of unpacking, but because we know what a particular type of engagement with the SDGs as superficial can lead to. So yeah, not stop, or maybe not working that much on convincing them, but more working with them on how do we do it in a way that is actually going to transform universities. Yeah, but we'll talk about that a lot more. We can talk about that another time.
Any questions in the room? Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. In ranging over an incredibly broad, complex topic, which you can't say at the end, and the answer is X. If you had one wish, if there was one thing that you could do to influence all that, you're talking to an opinion leader or someone in control, say, if only we could do X, what would X be? What would be the one thing that could most move that in the direction you'd like it to go?
Stop looking at the third mission and community engagement as the child that you don't like. Because I put the three circles equal, the typical Venn diagram, right? But the reality is the community engagement is this side and everything else is bigger. And everything else, and then community engagement is valuable when it creates some sort of profit. But how about when we're engaging with different actors in society for sustainability projects that's not going to necessarily create some sort of profit? So I would do that. Like, if I had one wish, I would make it bigger, almost encompassing the other two, in a wider understanding of what community engagement is. It's not only technology transfer. It's not only working with some governments, which is great. It's a lot more than that. And it's an engaged learning too. It's education that's engaged with communities, research that's engaged with communities and their needs. Any other questions? Amir, yes.
Thank you. At first, I should ask you to pardon me for my English. It's been less than a month since my arrival. And maybe my question might be really like amateur, but while you were talking about discursive effects of SDGs in universities, I found a similarity to injective or descriptive behavior in it, like which is being driven by questions like, what the society expects us to do, or how to be the good guys, the things that universities might be thinking about. And do you agree with this or not? And if so, how can we take advantage of that to make the universities more involved or better involved?
Yeah. Partly I agree with that. I think I'm not going to say that universities are changing the ways that they talk about their role just because everyone else is doing it. I think partly is that, but I'm also not that cynical. I'm not saying that you are cynical, but I'm not that cynical thinking that, oh, everyone's doing it, let's do it. I think that there are very many people within universities really trying to make some sort of change. And a lot of the pushing that they're doing inside is also driving universities to do those changes. So yeah, partly, perhaps someone that is writing the strategic documents is thinking about that quite a lot more, but I think there's a lot behind there. What do? I would say it's very similar to what I said to Michael. Like, to me, it's very much about that relation with other actors and opening up to them and rethinking knowledge with them. That is what can change universities. Yeah, no worries.
It's right at the time. It's 1 o'clock. I actually had a very question that I'm really dying to ask. If you had any reflections based on basically what you're hearing about universities at Cord and what is going on in that debate, if you see any relation between that and the work you have been doing, and if you have any perspectives or insights on that.
So universities, what's happening with universities?
Universities Accord, like the new,
Accord.
yes,
yeah,
in Australia.
I guess I would reflect that when universities get together, when there's a push from society highlighting their issues, like it gives me a little bit of hope, but at the same time, I'm not sure if universities are more like reacting to certain things instead of kind of being part of the change. But I haven't reflected on it as much, to be honest. So I'll think about it. And
there will be quite a few discussions, of course, in the coming months and maybe year, really looking at that and at the implications for our education, for our graduate research, for our research, etc., etc. So I think it would be really nice to also use your insights because you have been deep into this.
I'll think about it.
Yeah. All right.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining.
I'm very happy to talk about all of these things to the people online.
Yeah.
The email is there generally.
Yeah, a few people also have thanked you online and said they would like to be in touch as well. So thanks, Andrea. Thanks everyone for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you.